Hello, I'm Doug Apple, back with another special interview for you today. And change is in the air. Do you feel it? I mean, the weather's changing around here, but the change in the air when you read about politics, we were coming off the big election, and we have a new president who's going to be coming in. He's now filling out all of his leadership roles. A lot of people are wringing their hands. A lot of people are celebrating. But no matter how you look at it, there are a lot of changes taking place, big changes in the country and in government, and it's going to affect us all in this direction and in that direction. So let's talk just a little bit about how should we think about these changes? How should we respond to these changes from a Christian perspective and just from a logical perspective. And so we've got our guy on the phone, Mike Sharman. He is the legal counsel for Share Healthcare. He's up near Washington, D.C. and Virginia. So he's kind of got the pulse of what's happening around there. And Mike Sharman, we're talking about the big changes going on. And you are with Share Healthcare. So the changes will also be impacting healthcare one way or another. And we'll get into that too. But just as we're more and more of the statistics are coming in from the election, and we have a little more of a bird's eye view looking backwards about what happened, let's talk some about that and some of these changes that are taking place and your thoughts on what you're seeing and reading.
Well, we're going to be having a earthquake, a tsunami, huge hurricane of change, whatever metaphor you want to make. That's the type of change that we're currently seeing. It's even though President-elect Trump has not yet taken office, those changes are occurring now, and they're going to be occurring much more definitely in next year, that first year of his 4-year term, and then in those next 2 years, and then who knows what will happen after the midterm elections. What we do know is massive change is coming. We can see that the nation is much more politically conservative than it has been before in either 2020 or 2016. But that doesn't necessarily connect to them being more biblically conservative. And, it's not up to our politicians to inform us about what our Christian values are. It's up to us to inform them. And we can see that difference, that dichotomy, in a chart that the New York Times did 2 days or so ago, and it was support for Harris versus abortion access, and it shows that was a wide range in those states that were voting on abortion access, a wide range between the vote that came in for President Trump and the vote that was there for abortion access, or the votes that were coming in for Vice President Harris, rather. And so one of the smallest differences was in New York, where there was 56% of a vote for Vice President Harris, but 62% for abortion access. So more people wanted abortion access and voted for it than voted for Harris, which means Republicans voted for it. The widest range was in Montana. Only 38% of their electorate voted for Vice President Harris, but 58%, 20 more percent, voted for the abortion access bill that was on their ballot. So just because somebody's politically conservative doesn't mean they're voting for, that they are supporting abortion, or that they aren't supporting abortion, that they're being pro-life. That's up to us to inform them about this is a human being that the mother is carrying. This is a life that is created in the image of God. We also want to recognize that what are the motivators in our culture, whether it's Republicans or Democrats. In both of them, the motivators were the economy, number one, immigration, number two, and the whole transgender disturbance, boys and girls locker room type of issue. That was number three. And that was true for both of them. And for both conservatives and liberals, abortion was down there below that. But it's interesting that we joined together, Democrats and Republicans have a overlap of interest in the issue of male and female and that transgender one. There might be for different reasons. I mean, obviously from us, from a Christian perspective, we want to recognize that God created us and he created us male and female. Somebody who doesn't believe in God, though, can see the inherent danger in having boys in girls' locker room and the inherent unfairness of having boys and men in girls' and women's sports. So we do want to be looking at our commonality. But again, it's up to us to inform the public. It's unkind to be pro-abortion because it harms both the child and the mother. It's unkind to be pro-transgender because that person will be harmed for the rest of their life, and their decision about being a transgender, going through all that process and disrupting not just their own identity, but their extended family, or their primary family, and their extended family's view of what that family's identity is. If an 18-year-old decides to transition, how does that affect a 5-year-old little sister or 5-year-old cousin? Those are things that we need to be continually letting people know is when we're against something, it's because we are for kindness. And as we look at these changes that are going on, we need to look at how do we respond kindly. Yes, we want this dramatic revolution in government that we're seeing because we can just tell we need it. When our interest on our national debt is larger than our defense budget, we know we must change. When we know that it would take 60 planes a day to deport 1 million illegals per year, we know things have to change. And that's where we are. We have supposedly 11 million illegals that do need deportation. And it would take 11 years to do it. So we have to be having massive change. How are we going to respond to it? How are we going to inform ourselves and stay educated? How are we going to inform our family and our community? How are we going to help change the culture to embrace what God would want us to embrace for his biblical reasons and not merely for political ones?
Now, you mentioned there's a difference between being conservative and being biblically conservative. What are the differences?
Let's see, I was reading Luke chapter 6 today, I think it is, the Sermon on the Plain. You can't read that and think that's conservative. That is as radical and revolutionary as you get of essentially having no selfishness left, being entirely, completely generous, having no sense of offense at all, being completely forgiving. Those are extraordinary things. And if we just did that on a day-to-day basis, we would have a revolution in our lives. Mm-hmm. If our elected officials know that's what we are expecting of them, whether they internally feel it or not, we would have a revolution in how politics are done. I was reading recently some histories on Reagan, and he had mentioned, he was asked about, well, how are you so friendly with the Democrats and the reporters who attack you all the time? And he said, well, they do that. We're going to have differences of opinion, but after 5 o'clock, we're all friends. Meaning after we stop talking about the work and the politics of what we do, we're still friends. Well, that explains a lot of how he was able to get so much done during his term.
So when we're thinking of healthcare, you're the legal counsel for Share Healthcare, and we've read some frightening headlines. It could be frightening to you, such as, for example, I'll call this up here on NBC. They're saying millions at risk of losing health insurance after Trump's victory. Well, that if you're sitting there thinking like, oh, I hope I'm not one of the millions, then that is a scary headline. What kind of, you're hearing about changes, you're seeing, the beginnings of changes already. What are you looking at and looking for regarding changes in healthcare coming up under a Trump administration? And as one headline put it, with a GOP trifecta, what does that mean for healthcare?
As you mentioned, I'm chief legal counsel for Share Healthcare, and Share Healthcare is a legal entity. It's a 501c3 ministry, and its specific ministry is in sharing the medical expenses of Christians. that Christians who are members share the medical expenses of the other Christians who are members. And we do it in an organized way. $149 per month for a single person for sharing, $249 for a couple, and $349 for a family of four, and $50 for every person after that. So it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward, ministerial work of just trying to care for one another. Now, for years, probably for, 10 years or so, there's always been one congressman or one senator trying to have the benefits that insurance has in your tax code be given to healthcare sharing ministries. For example, right now, healthcare sharing ministries, an employer who wants to give that to their employees can provide it for them as a bonus and bonus them. And he has a tax deduction because it's payment he's giving to his employees. The employees that receive that as taxable income, not as a tax-exempt item as they would with insurance. So those legislative hopes that have been going on for a decade or so will probably come to fruition during this next 2 years. That looks like it would have a momentum in a trifecta government where the House, the Senate, and the President are all Republicans and relatively conservative ones. That would also be that healthcare sharing ministries would probably be able to be eligible for HSAs, et cetera. President Trump, during his first term, had proposed that in a rulemaking, but he wasn't able to get that through because he didn't have control of the Congresses, et cetera, with conservative Congresses. Remember, those first 2 years, he did have the Republican House, but it was not conservative, and they didn't want to be doing that. They did want to be trying to manage the issue of Obamacare. So that's what I would see for healthcare sharing ministries. I would also see a Justice Department that's much more helpful, perhaps, in the few states, California, Washington, Colorado, New Mexico, are constantly antagonistic to healthcare sharing ministries because we are Christian. We don't share in abortions, the expense of abortions. We don't share in the expense of abortifacients. We don't share in the expense of transgender destruction. So those very radical states in Washington, California, New Mexico, Colorado don't like that. So they consistently come against healthcare sharing ministries in one way or another. And with either a conservative or even just a neutral Department of Justice that's looking at helping us protect our constitutional right against bureaucracies run amok, that might be helpful there. In terms of healthcare policies, they're going to delete I expect that they're going to delete all of the subsidies for transgendering, which there's been much that has been put in. And as Vice President candidate Tim Walz had promised, they would make sure and have that be over all agencies and over all states, that it would be much more, all health care for transgendering would have been free to the individual wanting it, and that the healthcare or health insurance entities would be mandated to provide for it. So that's not going to occur. And like I said, I think they're going to be taking down the subsidies that exist for that now. There's going to be pretty tight scrutiny, I think, on the subsidies to abortion clinics, notably Planned Parenthood. They're going to be looking at how to undo that. They're going to be looking at how to undo the rulemaking that said that you have to have a transgender woman, or a man who has transgendered to be a woman, that he would no longer be allowed to share a dorm room or a hospital with a biological woman. So all those cultural extremes will be taken out, and hopefully we'll get back to a system of just health care. The excessive subsidies, subsidizing healthcare systems that don't need subsidies, subsidizing individuals who really don't need subsidies, those will probably be severely scrutinized and probably will go away. I think the Congress, the House of Representatives, and the Senate would probably be inclined to do that even if it were not for the fact that Elon Musk and Ramaswamy have now gotten the tap on the shoulder to be the Department of Government Efficiency. There's a whole lot of inefficiencies in the federal subsidies to health care, whether it's Medicaid, Medicare, et cetera. Something as simple as a child who's incorrigibly delinquent, not that they have ADHD, not that they're autistic and might act up in class, but they're just rotten kids who fight the teachers all the time, cuss them out, et cetera. Well, those kids can get what's known as an IEP. They can be labeled as behaviorally having a behavioral disorder. And because they have a behavioral disorder, they're eligible for SSI, Social Security supplemental income. Most folks don't know that. Well, what on earth are we subsidizing that for? And yet we do. So those are the type of things that we need to look at to bring that part of our economy down. Because it's between, it's probably right about 20% of our national economy is what we spend on health care, and much of it is not health care. I think we'll also be seeing a lot more emphasis or ways to support the non-traditional medicines, in not just cut and prescribe type of doctors, but the doctors that are integrative medicine, more holistic medicine, doctors that are more direct pay payment providers, so that they aren't, they're typically outside of the insurance and Medicaid and Medicare systems, but perhaps make that easier for people who want to be paying for that with their insurance or with healthcare sharing ministry, make that easier for them to be doing that. We're in a time of change. We don't know exactly how that change is going to occur, but the encouraging thing to me is that the change is going to be rely on yourself and what you can do more, and have government be able to assist us in living up to our capacity as opposed to encouraging our dependency.
That seems like the American way.
It is, but it's been trounced on for the past 30 years, probably. Mm-hmm. It's being promoted. Dependency is absolutely being promoted. When you were growing up, did you ever hear the term helicopter parent?
No.
No. And we were able to stand out to the bus stop by ourselves. We were able to ride the bike around the neighborhood by ourselves. A kid 9, 10, 12 years old would be able to have their own newspaper route. 12, 13 years old could mow lawns around the neighborhood. The type of things that built up independence. Alexander de Tocqueville, when he was writing his Democracy in America thesis essay to send back to France, which had sent him as an observer, both nations were in revolutionary status, let's say, changing all their culture. And he was sent over to look at, well, what's America doing? How come it's blossomed so well? One of the things that he used as an example, he said, every young boy, every 10, 12-year-old boy who's coming back from herding his cattle for the day has a rifle over his shoulder. And to de Tocqueville, that kind of represented, one, everybody is the militia. Everybody's the militia. So the government could never retake and enslave the people because everybody was the militia. Mm-hmm. But it also was an example to him, symbolic to him, of the independence of each person, the self-sufficiency that was being indoctrinated into, as you mentioned, the American way. Well, we need to get back to that, being able to stand up for ourselves, being able to speak for ourselves. It's refreshing to think we might get back to the place, and we might be at the place right now, where the old cliche is, well, this is America, you can say what you think. Well, that had been absolutely wiped off in the past, 4 years, and then in the Obama terms before that. You were in danger of what you said. There were people who lost their jobs because they wouldn't say he for a she and she for a he. And there were churches that were being challenged. And in our area, there was a church, a small church, in Chesapeake, Virginia, where the pastor was charged criminally because he held a service during COVID of like 12, 15 people. That was all his church had. And everybody was appropriately 6 feet apart, et cetera. But he was charged criminally for that and convicted. So hopefully our First Amendment will once again be true to what its own terms are, that we really can have freedom of religion. We really can have freedom of speech. We really can have the freedom to assemble. We really can have the freedom to petition our government for redress of our grievances. So hopefully that's the type of change that's occurring. But we have to be the educational tool. We, meaning the body of Christ in America, the church in America. We have to be the educational tool that informs those who are elected and informs the rest of our community that we want to make sure we're always doing the rule of law under God in accordance with it, what His word is. Because whether somebody's a believer or not, it will work out to their good if we are doing the rule of law under God.
And that leads us right into you talking about share healthcare, because this is a way of handling your healthcare expenses as a Christian in a biblical manner. So as we wrap up our time today, Mike, just go ahead and, for those who haven't heard it already, lay out the case of why share healthcare is a biblical way of handling your healthcare expenses and also financially wise.
Well, I mentioned the financially. It's $149 for a single, $249 for a couple, $349 for a family of 4. So that allows people to be much more self-sufficient. That allows a family to be saving up for a house if they want, because the average insurance is $2,200 a month for a family of 4, the average across the United States. And so they can be saving up for their own house to be self-sufficient that way instead of always being renters. It allows them to make the decision about whether or not they're going to have children and be able to have the mom be the stay-at-home parent, because they'll be able not to have to be indentured servants to their job because they have to have the health insurance. Because here we have something that's very affordable. It allows us as a group of Christians to decide we want to be taking care of our medical expenses, doing it exactly the way Scripture says, of sharing one another's needs. We don't want to be forced to pay for abortions, abortifacients, transgendering, alcohol abuse, tobacco abuse, drug abuse, etc. We don't want to be forced to do that. And the fact that we aren't and that we don't share in those things is a huge explanation of why we are the low amounts we are compared to the high amounts of insurance. And that allows others to look on, and we can tell them we're just following the Bible. And this allows us to be much more self-sufficient rather than dependent on a corporation to employ us, rather than be dependent upon a government to provide this health exchange or subsidies of it. We can do it on our own. And when we begin exercising that self-sufficiency muscle in one area and exercising our faith in that area, we will then be building up those muscles so that we will feel more competent and capable of exercising self-sufficiency in other areas. This encourages people who are employees to also think of, well, how can I be an employer? How can I be an entrepreneur and start off my own business, just myself doing it, maybe, the family helping out, and soon employ other people? And that's the way we have economic expansion, when people have opportunity. And this Share Healthcare helps people have that opportunity.
Well, if you'd like more information about Share Healthcare, you can find their website, sharehealthcare.com. And when you're ready to talk to a person in person on the phone, you can call 1-844-SHARE-HC. That stands for Share Healthcare. We've been talking with Mike Sharman of Share Healthcare. And for Wave 94, I'm Doug Apple.